Hey all, John Bellamy here, and in today's video I wanted to talk to you all about reactivating your database. And specifically what we're talking about here is how do we go and turn those dormant leads into active conversations. So really what I want you to be thinking about is this big idea of that your cheapest lead is someone who already knows you, right, or knows who you are. They've got some type of relationship. So let's dig into this and drive this forward. I want you to be thinking about is something that I call like the chasing trap. So really what I want you to get down to the nitty gritty is like before you start spending another dollar on paid ads, right? Look at what you already own. Now, let me be clear before I dive any further into this. I'm not saying that paid ads are bad or that you shouldn't be spending money. In fact, you always want to have money allocated and turned on for ads. But what we're talking about here is although you've got ads and leads coming through there, we want you to really focus on the leads, the activity that you've got in your database, right? So the problem is that owners will spend time and money chasing cold traffic, while warm opportunities, think like opportunities that have stalled in your pipeline, things quotes that you've sent out but you haven't had a response from, think clients who had purchased from you before and then they haven't purchased from you in a while. Like that's the problem. We just sort of leave these people to the side and we don't actually activate and re-engage with them, and we just keep focusing on I need new people out there. Whereas the reality is that this ultimately typically happens because there's no real system or structure in place that goes, how do we bring them in and then how do we retain and reactivate them as we are moving through the journey? So I want you to really think about is reactivation isn't a one-off tactic, right? It's not like, oh, I need to get some cash in NetSuite. Maybe I'll send an email to people on my database. This is really a component of what we call your demand generation system. And it's a key pivotal component of that. So why reactivation typically fails? Well, a lot of the time it comes down to these three things. It's really number one, it comes down to weak language. So this is where people, will just go to ChatGPT or whatever, and it's like a checking in email, right? So the language, there's no real decision. It's just like, hey, I'm sending you an email for the sake of it because I haven't spoken to you in a while. But there's no real call to action. There's no real activating activity behind that. Typically, a lot of the time, number two is that people will go and overcomplicate it. So they'll go, I'm going to do a reactivation campaign. I need to have this U-bit funnel in place. I need these 6-part automations in place. I've got these 10 technologies that are going to make sure that people are going through in the right way. And then I'm going to take them this path, they do this, and this path, they do that. Just completely overcomplicated, right? And then the third thing is there's just no structure. So they just, wham, bam, thank you, man, I'm sending an email, instead of going, well, hold on a second. Where does this reactivation actually form part of our entire demand generation strategy, inside of our whole client flow strategy? Where does that sit there and where does this go? And because we don't have structure, momentum fades because typically we'll rely on memory and memory fades. And then I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week, I'll do it next month. And then all of a sudden the data is just gone, dead and buried. So the lesson here is that a list, so like a segmented list of people in your database, is absolutely useless unless it sits inside of a system, right? So I just want you to be thinking about that for a moment. So where this really comes down to is the direct reset strategy. So what I want you to think about, knowing that typically this is just a chaotic process, right? Is that we need to have these principles in place, being that a direct and structured message that actually prompts a real decision, that uses directness to invite a discussion rather than just leaving it open. So instead of going from the checking in approach, we want to go into more of like the closing the file approach. So what I mean by that is this is an approach that is actually going to create some movement without pressuring your contacts as well. So the goal here is like a real decision versus like not a vague response in that regard. So ultimately what you are then communicating in your reactivation campaigns is a direct clarity of a message, where you're creating the permission and providing that permission for the prospect to essentially self-select and elect themselves back into a conversation with you, or equally select and elect themselves out of a conversation with you. And this is why we're looking at the re-engagement. We're not looking for every single person to raise their hand and say, well, actually, now is a good time, I'm ready to go. We're looking for that select few, but it's the languaging and the positioning of those messages that's actually going to help us do that. So the shift really here is we're going from checking in blasé messaging to closing a file with a direct action on that. So we can self-select in or out. Either result is perfect from there. So the pattern and the insights that you really want to be thinking about and considering when you are creating these types of reactivation messages, well, you really want to be thinking of from that thoughtful operator move. So this is where if you were going to hand select a number of people on your database because you've identified that I've spoken to these people within 3 to 6 months ago about a specific quote for a specific style of job, you can then be thoughtful and start to create a customized and bespoke reactivation campaign for that type of segment of people versus just anybody and everybody on a database, right? So when you're reopening these conversations, you're sharing some patterns that you might see in the market that then enable you to position yourself as that expert, as that authority within that. The other side of the type of messaging style that you can use is like that value-led reactivation. So this is leading with an offer to share a solution to a common problem that they might be having, once again, to drive some urgency and to spark some actual intent based response. You could then just go straight into your expert positioning, where you are positioning yourself as an expert, not just somebody chasing a sale. And then when you lead with an insight, that you can really change that power dynamic within those. And ultimately, what you're doing by choosing either the thoughtful operator, that value-led reactivation, or that expert positioning, is you're really then enabling a better quality of outcome, a better quality of result. So as an example here, like I was sharing before, we might be targeting or looking to reactivate, if I was an acupuncturist clinic, reactivate patients who haven't been in the clinic for more than 90 days. So we might do a search and we go, okay, their last treatment in our clinic was, say, 3 to 6 months ago, and I want to reactivate these people. Okay. And what you might want to do is you might want to use one of these thoughtful operator, value led reactivation, or expert positioning angles and ideas to speak to these people. So the messaging could be, hey, listen, we know that it's been between sort of 3 to 6 months since you were last in clinic. One of the things that I wanted to share with you was a new update or some latest research around the frequency of acupuncture equaling results, as an example, like something like. So you can start to take that expert positioning in your messaging from there, and then giving them an activated next step to book in a meeting with you, a treatment, a call, ask some questions, just getting them to start a conversation with you from that side. So we want to really look at those patterns and the value adds that come in with that. Moving on, what you really want to be ultimately getting here is the systems integration, right? And this is where we talk about how do we integrate things like a reactivation campaign into what we call our growth engine. So this is talking about, from your client flow, from your demand generation, from your local authority to your client communication system. This all makes up that growth engine. And think of it, we're spinning 4 plates, right, across that board. So when it comes to the reactivation side of things, we know that this forms part of that demand generation system. And so what we want to have a look here is like, how do we actually deploy a system that can potentially automate all of this, or give us a structured process that we can manually trigger some automations from this type of flow. So at first it starts with that segmentation. So knowing exactly who to message, like past inquiries, old quotes, previous clients, like what does that specifically look like from a segmentation perspective? Is it identities within our database? Is it time frame plus identities? Is it just based on people engaging or not engaging with lists? Like what do those segmentation lists look like? Then the visibility, this is now how do you then leverage this reactivation to become visible again in front of these prospects, these old clients, whatever that looks like, and leveraging your CRM as that single source of truth to deploy that visible metric with them. So it could be a triple pronged attack via email, SMS, and then engaging some social or some paid ads from a reactivation. So you're really becoming you as that visibility machine within your target audience. And then it's the consistency and having that system in place. Having the system that creates the segmentation, that we know that we've got a visibility channel that we're going to reactivate these conversations with, we can then start to create some consistency and start to automate those systems and those processes behind the scenes. So it's really, you're building momentum over time, which is great with a reactivation campaign. So really what this comes down to is a contrast, right? Versus reactivation as a tactic versus an actual system. So reactivation as a tactic, really think of it like you're probably doing this right now. It's a random one-off push when things get a bit quiet and you're like, oh my God, I need some more money in the business or more leads to come through. It's pretty fragile because you're really relying on luck for a reply versus structure. It's weak if you're using like the wrong language, just your checking in language versus really a pointed outcome language from there, which is like, can I close the file on this? And because it's just a tactic, we really don't have any control on what's going on other than you just sending it sporadically. There's no real system or control. So the reactivation is really hope, right? Versus reactivation as a system where we've got a structured approach. It's a repeatable part of your demand generation strategy. It's built in to your calendar or into a workflow. It's not dependent on you to remember when that goes on. You've got more control because you've got segmented follow-up, segmented lists that will drop into different types of reactivation campaigns. It's direct because we're prompting a decision, right, to either opt out or engage with a particular type of conversation, depending on what that reactivation method is. And then you're going to, over time, get that compounding effect because as you've got leads flowing in, then they flow past into a reactivation campaign. They get nurtured. They might come back into the top. We start speaking to them again. Then they might drop off. We've got them into a different reactivation campaign. You've got this compounding effect of this engine actually working for you, which then reactivation becomes leverage, right? Because it's working as part of that whole system. So what are the next steps? What have we spoken about today and what are the next steps? The big thing I want you to be thinking about here is you need to get clarity first, then control, right? So I want you to not necessarily go and send something right this second today, okay? But I want you to get some clarity first. So how do you go and do that? Well, number one, you just stop chasing cold traffic. Like, once again, yes, we want to have ads running. Of course, it's a lifeblood of a business, but we need to couple those ads and those outbound activities to generate new leads for us, couple them with our reactivation campaign to make sure that we're squeezing as much juice as we can out of our database, out of our contact list from there. So the action steps for you to do today to go and take that is with the link with this video, just go and click on that link and actually download our database reactivation playbook. Okay. Then what I want you to do is look at that playbook and pick one of the 5 strategies. Okay. There's 5 in there for you. Pick one of the 5 reactivation strategies. Then go and identify, even if it's just a handful of people, 10, 20, 50 people in your database, and deploy that one strategy. Do it manually at the start and check for the results, right? I want you to build that reactivation into your growth engine, but test it out, see how that works. Did you get some results from that? And then what did that lead to? And ultimately, once you've gone and done that, if you would like to take your next step from there and you'd like to understand how does this reactivation strategy intertwine and really connect together as part of that growth engine, then I invite you to actually schedule a call with us and we can explain more about what the growth engine is, how it works within your business, if it's a fit for you, and then we can take the next steps. But your very next step is just to go and click that link with this video and go and download our database reactivation playbook. My name's John Bellamy. Have a great day, and I hope you found this video of value. Talk soon.